Lee Marvin names the 7 actors he hated most. Until his last breath, Lee Marvin, the legendary film icon of the 1950s and 1960s, the last soldier of Hollywood, still referred to certain people by one name, the ones I never want to see again. Throughout his career, he publicly pointed out 7 names he hated most. He was neither a flawless star nor someone who tried to please the crowd. He lived the way a soldier does, honest, straightforward, and always ready to confront. On set, he would throw his hat on the ground, smash a whiskey glass, or even walk away from a role simply because he refused to share the screen with some people. Off-screen, he never hesitated to call them by the harshest name he could think of. "I'd rather hang up my gun and leave the screen than stand next to a fake hero." Those 7 names weren't nobodies. They were legends' faces admired by the public, co-stars, rivals, even people who had once clinked glasses with Marvin after a scene. Behind decades of deep hatred, was it merely the wounded pride of a star, the jealousy of a man who had walked through hell, or perhaps an untold secret about the darker side of Hollywood? Lee Marvin was born in 1924 in New York City and grew up in a family with a long military tradition. When World War II broke out, he dropped out of school, enlisted in the Marine Corps, and was sent to the Pacific Front. During the Battle of Saipan, he was struck by machine gun fire, suffered a severe sciatic nerve injury, and spent more than a year in the hospital. In return, he was awarded the Purple Heart, proof of the blood and bone he left on the battlefield. Perhaps it was war itself that shaped Lee Marvin, blunt, tough, and uncompromising. Unlike many Hollywood stars who only donned a uniform to play heroes, Lee Marvin had truly lived the war, where mud, blood, and bullets were not props. He had crawled through trenches, watched comrades fall beside him, and carried a Pacific battle scar on his back for the rest of his life. That experience turned him into an actor who didn't need to act. Every fierce glare and tight-jawed expression on screen came from real memories, not performance techniques. After leaving the military, Marvin didn't march straight into Hollywood. He drifted through odd jobs, living like an invisible man, until fate intervened one day when an actor fell ill and Marvin was pulled in as a last-minute replacement. With no training and no preparation, he exploded the moment he stepped on stage. His towering figure, cold steel gaze, and raw energy made it impossible for audiences to look away. At that moment, he knew he was born to be in front of the camera. From nameless mercenary roles, Marvin quickly became the ace every director wanted. In The Big Heat 1953, he played a ruthless gangster who sent chills through Hollywood. By Bad Day at Black Rock 1955, a single glance from him was enough to stretch the tension to breaking point. And when the 1960s arrived, Lee Marvin shed his supporting roles and stepped firmly into legendary status. In The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance 1962, he became Liberty Valance, a villain so iconic that audiences remembered him more than stars John Wayne and James Stewart. 3 years later, he stunned the industry by playing 2 completely opposite characters in Cat Ballou 1965, a drunken wreck and a cold-blooded killer, and won the Academy Award for Best Actor. But that very success made Lee Marvin a misfit in glamorous Hollywood, because he not only despised pretense, he could never forgive those who wore fame like a costume and disrespected the craft of acting. And so, throughout his career, Marvin openly listed 7 people he would never shake hands with, never share a frame with, and in fact, never even look at again. The first name on that list was none other than Hollywood's biggest cowboy, John Wayne. 1. John Wayne, the hero who never went to war. John Wayne, the name forever tied to the image of the American hero, cowboy hat, proud stance, and an unflinching smile in the face of danger. Millions of Americans once saw him as the embodiment of masculinity, the pride of an entire generation. But to Lee Marvin, it was all one giant performance. Marvin, who had crawled through trenches, heard bullets scream past his ears, and carried the bodies of fallen comrades on his back, could never stomach a hero who had never actually held a real gun. Wayne never enlisted. When World War II broke out, he stayed in Hollywood, dodged the draft, and continued building his image as an unbreakable soldier through safe scripted scenes behind a camera. To Marvin, that wasn't just hypocrisy, it was a personal insult. On the set of the Comancheros, the air was as heavy as the calm before a storm. Cameras stood silent. The crew waited, but what they were about to witness wasn't in the script. John Wayne, the bigger star, the man America worshipped as an icon, walked up to Marvin and, half joking but half commanding, said, "Lee, you're stealing the frame. Tone down the intensity. Let the audience see me." A few awkward laughs broke the tension. But Marvin didn't laugh. He stared at Wayne for a long moment, not with the eyes of an actor playing a cowboy, but with the eyes of a man who had crawled through blood-soaked trenches and picked up the bodies of friends under fire. Then, suddenly, he removed his cowboy hat and hurled it to the floor. The sharp thud echoed in the suffocating silence. Marvin walked slowly toward Wayne, stopping just close enough for everyone on set to hear his breath. Then he spoke, not loudly, but with a chill that made spines stiffen. "You might play a soldier better than I do, but you will never know the smell of mud, the taste of blood, or the sound of bullets tearing over your head." No one dared say a word. The cameraman later recalled he could hear the clock ticking after that line. Wayne stood there, his smile frozen as if someone had just ripped open a secret he'd hidden his entire career. They still finished the film, still shook hands on the red carpet, still posed for photos side by side as if nothing had happened. But in Marvin's eyes, Wayne died. In that moment, died as a man he could ever respect. From that day on, they were no longer two actors sharing a film, they were two entirely different worlds. On one side was a man who had lain in blood-soaked trenches and understood the true cost of survival. On the other was someone who built his heroism from lines of dialogue and stage lights. No more polite greetings, no more small talk. Between them stretched an invisible gulf, not a few feet of soundstage, but a chasm carved out of trust and dignity. Marvin once told close friends during a drunken night, "I'd rather hang up my gun and walk away from the screen than share a frame with a fake hero." And he kept his word. For the rest of his life, there wasn't a single scene, a single project, a single moment where Lee Marvin had to swallow that contempt. Yet if Wayne represented false heroism painted to look noble, then at the other end of the spectrum was a kind of person Marvin despised even more. Someone who believed fame gave them the right to trample over every principle. And no one embodied that more than Frank Sinatra, a star so big he thought entire film crews should orbit around him, a king of Hollywood, who Marvin once admitted, "Just hearing his name is enough to make my blood boil." 2. Frank Sinatra, the king of ego. If Lee Marvin ever truly hated someone down to his bones, that someone was Frank Sinatra, legendary singer, box office titan, American icon. And to Marvin, the living embodiment of Hollywood's most rotten ego. Marvin's contempt wasn't about Sinatra's talent. He never denied the man's golden voice or magnetic charm, but about the star's arrogance, which often crossed the line into outright disrespect. Sinatra was notorious for showing up late, leaving early, and demanding that entire film crews bend to his schedule. But one time he pushed things too far. The clash began even before cameras rolled during negotiations for a project they were supposed to work on together. That day, the entire crew waited